Commence primary ignition.
Hey there, friends, fans, and collectors. It's Wednesday, so we're talking Andor. Let's get going on the 9th episode. We open up on Ferrix, where at the end of the last episode, Bix was detained by the ISB and Deirdre Miro, and we really see some pretty intense interrogation. We learn that through this interrogation method, her friend had been broken, Pack had been broken, and this is it was a long drawn out scene and just really intensely signifying why the ISB is so bad. But also, we have some really interesting torture techniques they were used. You know, I was expecting the little torture ball, the wah 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 torture ball or something, but they are on a whole nother level of dystopian terror with the torture methods they used. And it was an auditory recording that they found hurts and causes people trauma, and they got the recording from a sentient race that was genocided. Apparently this is their death knell sound. So what just awfully sci-fi horrifying, but we get this extended scene of Bix being tortured by this isolated sound, and she reveals everything she knows, and we learn that she doesn't know who Luthen is at all. We also learn that the Imperial Prefect there plans on hanging Pack in the square just to kind of send a message. Again, more demonstration of the Imperials at their brutalness. But the ISB is hot on the trail for Cassian Andor and decides to not interrogate his mother and to continue to use her as bait, hoping that Andor will pop back up. The most important thing to take away is the successful covering of Lutherans Trail. Now, we know they were all worried that Andor knew too much and that he might be exposing himself too much, but in the ISB meeting later, we learn that they have no idea on him. He's still codenamed Axis. They're doubling down their search on the frontline rebels and unable to find any more information on him, hoping that he will slip up. We then take another trip back to the Imperial Senate, where we see fascism taking over at a frightening pace. Mon Mothma is leading an argument about the PORD measures and how any word outspeaking the Emperor now comes with an incredibly high tax and an incredibly high prison sentence. You could not only see the lights turning off and the senators literally tuning out her speech, but you can also hear the shouts of "Long live the Emperor" and all kinds of nasty fascistic things being yelled at her during her speech. And you can really see the complacency of the Imperial Senate giving up their power to the Emperor. Mon Mothma has some really beautiful words about how this Republic of this used to be a temple of democracy, but that it is clearly no longer, and she is really disheartened by this. We get a call from her driver that her cousin has arrived, and we learn when we see that Vel is actually related to Mon Mothma. This makes sense because we knew that Vel came from some kind of a rich family, but there's this nice little get-together where they get to see each other. They don't tell each other much because they're still very much spies, but they acknowledge that they're in this battle together. They both acknowledge that the rebellion comes first and that the Empire doesn't rest. Now, this also seems to be a similar theme throughout these series of episodes that, people might be in prison, people might be at work, but the Empire has been building speed and not resting at all in their takeover of the galaxy. We then travel back to Nakima 5, where we see more time has passed and Andor is planning a breakout. This is the same broken down Andor that we saw before, but he is intent on not dying in this prison, or at least not dying in bondage in this prison. Now again, we get more Melshi, and it is really hard to see Melshi, who we know as this tough rebel commando and an eventual hero of Rogue One. He really is just a completely broken down dude who's saying, we're never getting out of here, they're gonna work us to death. And in the end game of this episode, we find out that Melshi knows more about what's going on than you would believe. As I mentioned in previous episodes, these prisoners really are their own Overwatch. When they have prisoners guarding other prisoners, competing against other prisoners, The prison not only is the actual place they're locked into, but the prison's also the mindset of how they're worked and how they're kept. The Imperial officials keep them in a state of fear. It's really terrifying, but it's also soul-crushing in a way where they are visibly getting worked to death as the days and as the months go on. In this system where they're all watching each other over, they all constantly know not to talk to each other, not to talk about anything, not to fuel any kind of rebellion. And this is in the design of the prison. But Andor at this stage is believing that, that is a falsitude. They're not constantly listening. They don't have enough men. They don't have the power. And even more importantly, the Imperials don't care to listen. All they have to do is work someone to death every once in a while, shock the floors twice a day, and they're going to keep their prisoners in line. We see Cassian trying to plan different breakouts. In the bathroom area of their work floor, we see him sawing away at some little thing behind a panel. I don't know if that's going to be foreshadowing or if that's just showing him grasping at straws in any kind of way that he can. We also see him talking with his workmate about even just jumping the guards when they're bringing down other prisoners. But we see that Andor is really decided on getting himself out or dying trying. We get an interesting quote from Melshi, which ends up being true, which is that these prisoners themselves are cheaper than droids and honestly easier to replace, which is horrifying. And we see that even though the prisoners are discouraged and kept from talking to each other, there is a very unique sign language that as they're waiting to go between their workspace and their living space, that floors are communicating with each other. Now we hear naysaying about this, how long it takes communication to go, how it's not faithful, but through this communication, they learn that the second floor has been fried. All of them were electrocuted. This is really terrifying, but it seems to instill a different type of rebellion and seems to really breed a different kind of fear in these prisoners. When these men believe they have nothing to lose, there really is nothing to lose, and anything can come from those ingredients. Even though Cassian is planning, we can also see him being smart with his tradecraft, making sure that the Imperials and the people that are watching on the cameras when they are, think they know nothing about anything that goes on in this prison. Ignorance is their safety, just as it is in any kind of Big Brother state. We get another painfully long scene in the cereal breakfast nook. I know I only speak for myself, but I, for one, have seen far too many dialogues, enough dialogues for the first 2 seasons entirely of him in that freaking breakfast nook. We learned that he got promoted. We don't know if this is true, but his mom seems to back off after learning that. Cyril does confront Deirdre Mira, and, she completely rebuffs him. She says, "Stop stalking me, stop being weird," and in her defense, he was being a weirdo. So I'm not sure what he thought would be the outcome from that. If she thought that, his stick-to-itiveness would mean ambition, but, it's not working for him. It doesn't seem to be working for him, and I'm curious as to what path this character is going to be taken on, because so far all we've seen him do is get, complained to by his mom and eat a whole box of cereal to himself. We get a very important meeting in the ISP conference room where we learn that they caught a rebel pilot. The ISP caught this pilot when he was using a stolen broadcast, which projected an Imperial craft when it wasn't. They followed him and they caught him. They learn about Anto Krieger's attack on the Spellhouse power station, the planned attack, and they, being the smart secret police, try and figure out a way that they can engineer this attack still happening, or the fact that they can learn more information or figure out where their base of rebels is operating from. This pilot spills everything he knows on the Spellhouse invasion, and we learn that the base for Anto Krieger probably is in Kafrene. Now, that's a planet we've heard before, but it's neat to hear that there's a separatist rebel holdout there currently fighting the Empire on this timeline. The ISB decides not to spoil this info. They scuttle the ship, kill the pilot, and they stage it in a way where Krieger's people will find the ship, pick it up, and then tow it back to their location. And the ISB will most certainly have a locator on that ship so they can track these rebels back to their base. Andor's been working closely with this group of people around his work table. Ulaf is the older gentleman there, and he really has been tiring and looks like he's being close to work to death. We see a really tiring shift where other people are having to step in. We've seen this for an episode now, step in, do work for him. We learn that he only has 40 days left to his sentence, but poor Olaf, after being worked really hard all day, goes down, and it looks really, really bad when they're standing and waiting. And they call a doctor there. I find it really interesting that the doctor is also a prisoner, so the only people there on the staff who are non-prisoners are the guards. It's fascinating. But the doctor says there's nothing they can do for him. He had a stroke, and he puts him to sleep, and it's just chemically puts him to sleep, which is just a really, really brutal, just see whole through the scene of this poor prisoner who was almost out of here being put to sleep. And this breaks Andy Serkis's floor manager character, who, after seeing this and hearing this and seeing that, there's no way out, and aside from watching their friend be put to sleep, they also learn that there is no out, that upon completion of their sentence, they just get moved to a different floor. And they also learn that that's the reason that the second floor got fried. As they realized this, they all decided to do something and shout up about it, and they all got fried on the spot. So this is dangerous information to have, but it's also really, really dangerous that they know that they're never going to get out in the first place. They're all going to, the Imperials plan on all of them dying in this prison. Thanks for watching another episode of Binary Sunset Review. Let me know what you think about the episode Nobody's Listening. And this episode 9, it kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. Now, we've been seeing these 3-pack episodes where the first 2 lead into an action-filled third episode, and we really didn't have that much happen this episode. All we saw was poor Olaf go down and die, and we learned that they're stuck in the prison. The biggest thing they set up definitely was the rebel pilot that was caught by the ISB. I think it's a really scary plan they have. It seems like they're going to be sniffing out one of the rebel cells, which is dangerous news for those fighters. Let me know what you think about the flow of these episodes, what you're thinking about Andor now that we're in our last 3 episodes of this season. Please comment below. Your likes and reviews are always greatly appreciated. As always, I've been Mike. Have a great day out there. Stay safe, stay sane, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.
I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe.